Hi guys, welcome to our channel. I am Megan Bottom. Dwayne Bottom is usually sitting right next to me if you're familiar with us. We are the Blended Family Marriage Coaches. That's who we are. That's what we do. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited. I had the opportunity to interview Mary Whitman Ortiz. She is a relationship coach, she's an author, and she specializes in sexual intimacy within the marriage. So I was excited to bring her to you guys and introduce her to you guys because of the things and the value that she can bring, given what we talked about in our coaching session last Tuesday. If you haven't checked out that video, please check it out. She refers to it once or twice in her interview because we did talk about some of the things that she wants to talk about as well. Stay tuned, check it out. I'm excited for you guys. Well, hi Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. It's wonderful to be here.
Good, good. Mary Whitman Ortiz is joining us today. She is a relationship coach as well as an author, and I was so excited that she takes the sexual and intimacy stance that I take and how important that is in our marriage and how much it's not addressed in the Christian church today. So I wanted to reach out to her and see if she would come out and talk to you guys, our audience, more about what she does and how she feels about sex and intimacy. Have you noticed that there's a big gap in the church today?
Oh, there is such a gap in the church today, and it's both extremes, because there are people who have embraced a whole message about sexual intimacy, but there's also a lot of fear and a lot of pushback going on.
Absolutely. When Dwayne and I were praying about this interview this morning, one thing that I said is that it reaches the right people, not just the people that want to be promiscuous and have a hard time staying true to their marriage or staying true to the marriage intimacy relationship, but also those that are in a marriage relationship and feel a little bit guilty about having a healthy sex life. Do you come across those people as well?
Are you saying they feel guilty because that's not where they've been encouraged to put their thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, they feel guilty because growing up that was considered dirty, or it wasn't talked about, or it was brushed under the carpet. And so now that they want to think about it and they want to talk about it and they want to have a healthy relationship with their husband, they feel guilty for having that.
Absolutely. I've described that as they said no for so long that it's hard to say yes.
Yeah.
It's not that automatic flip the switch, I said I do, and now I'm this whole free creative lover. It's a process, because it is. We're spirit, soul, and body. And so the process to step into sexual intimacy is spirit, soul, and body also.
So one thing that we talked about and something that you said that you'd like to follow up on is the number one problem in sexual intimacy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can. So I am a Christian sex educator, and I've gone through training, and I'm not just basing this on my experiences. I'm basing it on current research. I love bringing science and scripture and then personal experiences of God just revealing his truth. I incorporate all of that in what I do. But the number one most common problem in sexual intimacy, like presenting itself in therapy types of sessions, is low desire. Low sexual desire.
Low sexual desire. After working with several couples myself, the answer really didn't surprise me that is the one thing that leads to lack of intimacy and lack of sex in a married couple. However, what did surprise me is the 10 things that Mary listed that lead to having low sexual desire. So listen to as Mary explains what 10 things can lead to having low sexual desire.
A list of 10 causes for the low desire.
Okay, so do you want to share that with us?
I do, because out of this list of 10, and then there's way more besides this 10, but that's just a number we could probably wrap our brain around. Out of this list of 10, there is a number one cause. So big picture is the number one problem is low sexual desire. And then the other place I want to take that is qualifying what are these 10 reasons that low sexual desire is there. So I have a list.
Okay.
One is side effects from medication.
Can that affect both men and women, or do you notice just women mainly?
Totally men and women.
I haven't heard that. I knew that things like antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications can affect women. Can that also affect the sex drive in men as well?
Completely. And here's a slight side note to that. Even antihistamines, allergy season, you're trying to dry out your sinuses. Well, just imagine if you're drying out extra mucus in the membrane area, there are other parts of the body that might get dried out as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a good point. Yes.
Yeah. And we don't make the connection because, oh, I'm taking this for my sinuses and not thinking whole person and how it's affecting you. It can be a great sigh of relief. It's like, oh, you mean I just quit taking that and then I'm going to feel more lubricated and things are going to be that much better? So I love this part of what I do. This is the education part to get everybody on the same page. Number 2 is lack of skill as a sexual partner. I wasn't going to give background for all of them, but I can do this quickly. So you mentioned earlier about people feeling guilty. That guilt could have been a block if they grew up in a church mindset or another cultural mindset that was really inhibitive towards sex, and they didn't allow themselves to learn. They didn't allow themselves to even explore what healthy sexual intimacy might be. Whether they are or are not lacking in skill, if they just think that they're lacking in skill and can't perform like the expectation is, whether it's their expectation or their spouse's expectation, it's like, well, why even try if I might not measure up?
Right. Such an important thing to talk about, especially like you said, if you grew up not exploring that and not really knowing even what that looks like. Yes.
All right. The third one is relationship discord. Now, everyone could probably agree with this. If you're fighting with your spouse, then the last thing you want to do is be extremely vulnerable. And sexual intimacy is like your most vulnerable place of all. So that certainly, we can probably follow that correlation pretty directly.
Right. That's pretty much common sense that if you're not connecting on every other level in your relationship, it's really hard to connect sexually.
And people talk about, oh, what about makeup sex? Well, there's still a few steps in between there, because if you're in the middle of that tension, you're not usually running towards the bedroom at the same time.
Makeup sex, you guys. Did she really just go there? Oh, she totally went there. It's so very true, though. If you guys have conflict or friction in your marriage, it's really hard to be intimate with each other. If you guys are fighting and arguing, that's horribly hard to come together and connect on that kind of intimate relationship in the bedroom. Make sure that you make up before you have makeup sex.
All right, the next one is expectations from the media. People are quick to point out, and I know you did in a previous video, about the prevalence of pornography and how damaging it is. Even outside of pornography, what we have on the media now is what we would have considered 10, 15 years ago as soft porn. In these situations, both spouses are always ready and they are always looking their best and they always smell good and have wonderful breath, and they're not worried about their kids' science project, and they're not thinking about the laundry that they left in the dryer. Media expectations are perfection. And if that has been the guiding force for believing what we believe, well, then once again, you're already sunk before you even try.
Oh, yeah. I did mention that on our last video that we talked about sex and intimacy, that we set this high expectation for our spouse and even for ourselves to feel that way always and to be desired in that way always. That becomes such a mental block for us.
Okay, so the next one is fatigue. And I see that right now with the pandemic happening, because there's frustration, there's it is a mental, emotional, physical point of view. And sometimes we're drained and we're not aware of it. Sometimes we're depleted of our energy and it's a gradual thing and you don't see it happening. And that's why it might even surprise you.
Have you noticed with this pandemic too, because I have, that it's more of a mental fatigue that people aren't used to? Like, they don't understand why when they fall into bed, they're exhausted because they really haven't done anything. They're not going through the grind of a normal day. They're just exhausted, but constantly being in fear or worried or thinking about or homeschooling or wherever you're at. That just is such a mental exhaustion. And I think, like you said, people don't realize it. They don't understand why they're tired because they're really not doing anything.
And that leads to the next thing of beating themselves up. Well, I should be able to do this. I didn't do anything strenuous today. What's wrong with me? Anytime your thoughts cycle back around to that, then you're not at your best. The next one is hormones, and it certainly affects men and women, but for women, there are so many more times of life where hormones are calling the shot. Childbirth and nursing, pregnancy, and then PMS and menopause, and just every single day is a hormone day.
That is very true. I recently posted on a Facebook group a marriage tip to just give grace to your spouse. And a wife posted, I have the excuse of premenopause hormones. He doesn't have an excuse. How do I give him grace? And it made me laugh that men don't have the excuse of all of the monthly hormonal cycles. They do have some hormone issues, but they don't have all of the cycles that the women fluctuate with.
Right. I've seen some activities to help men become acquainted with that in like an object lesson. So you start hanging things on them that are a weight, and then try to walk with all of these things dangling, hangers and potted plants. And it's just like, how can you even walk a straight line with all of this distracting you and getting you out of balance?
Right.
Just
right.
Really happening. All right, the next one is body image. I certainly think this affects women more than men. But body image, I think I saw a percentage recently that the image of women in our culture that is the most desirable, according to media, is like 5% of the population. So it's crazy if that is the comparison. Sometimes it's a verbal comparison and you're actually having those conversations. Sometimes it's internal.
Absolutely. There's so much that circulates around your self-confidence. And if you're not confident in who you are, it's really hard to be vulnerable with somebody else.
And then I have past trauma, which covers a whole gamut of things. One of the statistics I've run across is that 1 in 3 women have suffered through some type of trauma in regards to sex. And this could be horrific acts done to you, of course, including rape, and human trafficking is so prevalent. But this trauma in regards to sex is also going through a miscarriage or infertility or these issues that are stressful in regards to what you think about sex. And I know one client that had lost her baby. And so when you back this up several steps, it's like, oh, but if I have sex and I possibly get pregnant and we possibly have a baby who possibly, dies. And so could sex equal death? It's just, our brains take us places. Sometimes it's a wonderful journey. Sometimes it's a bit of a scary journey.
I guess I never thought about how miscarriage and even probably childbirth could be a trauma that could affect the sexual relationship. You always assume, like you said, rape or human trafficking or something along those lines. Childbirth is extremely traumatic to a woman's body, and you don't think of things like that when you're thinking about sexual issues.
The next one is distorted beliefs, and we've hinted towards that several times in regards to growing up in a church setting where there was a lot of misinformation or lacking information, or when scripture gets used in a way that is distorted and presents like the man in a domineering role and a woman, a wife, not having her voice. So that really interferes with feeling free to express yourself, because there's this shutdown inside.
And it's true, we are supposed to be submissive to our husbands, but I think that's really scary when you get that way in the bedroom. And when women try to negotiate that, yes, we are supposed to be submissive to our husbands. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, they're supposed to love and respect us. So I think that they get stuck with that. We're supposed to be just open and willing at all times because that's what submissive looks like. And that really interferes with our sex life.
And I love going to the verse that is before wives submit to your husband. So I start with Ephesians 5:21, and that is in the Passion Translation. It talks about supporting one another in love out of reverence to God. So that's the big picture, that we are believing the best in each other. We are calling out the best in each other. We are supporting each other. And that's where that wholeness begins to get its feet.
Yes. And the scriptures that surround that, that one is the beginning, but after it says, but what husbands, you're supposed to love your wives like Christ loved the church. Like that's a kind of love that wouldn't expect you to be submissive if it wasn't right, if it didn't feel right. I think that so many people just get stuck on that one verse and it's misused and misinterpreted from the church in whole.
Yes. Those sound bites that are just missing the heart. You can pick up where people are in their fear process And I don't mean this in any kind of judgment about fear, because we've all been there and are there in different levels. It's just, this is one of those areas that is so taboo and just strikes fear really, really quickly.
Absolutely.
All right, I have one more for you, and this is fear of intimacy. Kind of plays into where we were going with that. And I can look at this even from a growing up in a household where it was dysfunctional and your thoughts, feelings, needs just really didn't have a safe place to be shared. There might have been judgment, there might have been belittling. If you grew up with that as an individual, and intimacy, not as a sexual intimacy, just an emotional, I'm sharing, I'm trusting place, if you don't know what that's like, and then you come to marriage and now intimacy is necessary, it's expected, and that can be really, really fearful.
I can see that being an issue. Yes, I absolutely. Was that your number one?
No. Well, I gave you all 10, and I didn't put them in a certain order. But out of this list, the number one most common problem for causing low sexual desire is...
So the number one thing that causes lack of desire, therefore lack of a healthy sex life and a lack of intimacy in the marriage is, here's a hint. She did list this in the 10 reasons that lead to this. So she didn't have it in a ranked list, which is fine. I'm excited. However, we're going to talk about this more in depth next week. So I'm going to wait until next Saturday to reveal this to you. What was the number one reason? I'm curious though, what do you think is the number one reason you guys have a lack of desire to improve your intimacy and your sex life in your marriage? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, ding ding, because you guys don't want to miss this episode next week to see what leads to this lack of desire for sex in your blended family marriage. I am so excited to share this with you. Dwayne and I will sit down and discuss it a little bit more. So make sure that you guys tune in. Plus, on Tuesday, we're going to give you guys some referrals. We're going to give you guys all of the best referrals that we have for books, podcasts, YouTube channels, things like that can bless your marriage. I don't want to neglect Mary Whitman Ortiz. She has some books too. Why can't I talk to my wife about sex, and why can't I talk to my husband about sex? Links to those to purchase will be listed in the description of this video, as well as next Saturday's video, and how to get a hold of Mary. If you guys have questions of her as well, all of the information on how to get a hold of her will be in the description box below. Don't forget to follow us on social media and all of the places that we can be followed. We're on Facebook and Instagram and everything like that. Again, it can all be found in the description below. Thanks again for joining us. I can't wait to talk more about this with Mary next week. Well, we did already talk about it. You guys will be able to see it next week. Thank you.